Today marks officially the second round of our top 11 tournament. As you guys heard, last week we had the top 11 49er games of the decade. Now today, as promised, the top 11 Warriors games of the decade. Now this, of course, will be followed by the top 11 San Francisco Giants games of the decade, and then our tournament officially begins, where we will determine what are the top 11 greatest games played by all three teams. What makes the top from all three, determine what are the 11 best games played by your favorite Bay Area sports teams. Now, before we get started, Raymond, why don't you let them know where can they find us?
You can like us on Facebook.com/The GoldCast, and you can also follow us on Twitter at @the_GoldCast. Be sure to like, subscribe, always. And you can also find us on Apple Podcasts, YouTube, and Stitcher, all under the same moniker of The GoldCast. Like, subscribe, and comment, because we always enjoy hearing from you, and we certainly want to get your take whenever we talk anything top 11, because it is always a blast to come up with your favorite top 11 of anything.
Absolutely. And Candlestick Will, where can they find us if they need to talk to us specifically about their top 11 lists? Where can they find us?
The easiest way is to go to Twitter at Top 11 Podcast, so Top 11 Podcast.
Yeah. And Raymond, where can they find you?
You can always find me on Twitter at Ray Solis and on Instagram at Ray Solis1.
And you can find me at my brand new handle. I am Rudy Third. I am Rudy 3RD. Candlestick Will, where can they find you?
They can find me on Twitter at Candlestick Will.
All right. Here we go. The top 11 tournament continues with our second round. But of course, as always, the greatest podcast intro in the game, the GoldCast. Here we go. Class is in session. Let's go.
San Francisco, are you ready? This is the GoldCast.
Boom. Welcome to another Top 11 podcast. We are the voice of the Bay. I'm your host, Rudy Solis III, and with me is my brother, my co-host,
Raymond Solis I, baby.
And our esteemed co-host,
Candlestick Will.
Boom. All right, gentlemen, here we go. The next round, arguably the most successful team, probably actually undeniably the most successful team in the Bay Area of the last 10 years. The Golden State Warriors, they are here and ready to show off what their top 11 games are. Candlestick Will, you and I were talking about this off air, but let's talk about it on air. Pretty tough. I would say the hardest of the three has got to be this round.
Yeah, well, I mean, just the sheer number of playoff games, the sheer number of wins. I mean, the 5-year stretch between 15 and 19, they won more games than any team in NBA history in a 5-year stretch. They've won 86 playoff games this decade, and just the sheer fact that they've been in 23 playoff series in this decade, and even in just the last 7 years, that there's just so many games that you could choose from, and that's just the playoffs. We're not even talking about all the regular season wins. So, yeah, it's definitely a lot of amazing accomplishments by this organization these last 7 years, and just incredible how many choices we have.
Absolutely, it was daunting. It was daunting to sit there and go, okay, which games do I think deserve to be on the top 11? What is the criteria? And as always, I think I speak for all of us when we say that it's always kind of a mix of historical importance, your personal favorites, coupled with significance to just the moment in time for that particular season. And it's always kind of a mix of that between what you find, what you think is probably the greatest game, what's your favorite game, and what's maybe the most important game just based on any given season. And so I think we were saying this before, I feel like every big game will probably be represented somewhere. But it'll be interesting to see what games make it to whose lists, and of course, as always, what is the number one greatest Warriors game of the past 10 years? That I'm very curious. Are we going to all hit number one again like we did with the 49ers, or are they going to be completely different, as most of the time they are? So it'll be very interesting to see where we land on all of this.
Yeah, let's do it. Ray, what do you got for 11 through 8?
So 11 through 8. Number 11 is the October 31st, 2017 game versus New Orleans Pelicans. For number 10, I've got the May 28th, 2018 game versus the Houston Rockets. And for number 9, I've got June 11th, the 2015 game versus Cleveland. And number 8, I've got May 22nd, 2017 Golden State versus San Antonio.
Nice. What about you, Rudy?
Ooh, all right. So my number 11, 2013, April 23rd, round 1, game 2 at Denver. Number 10 is 2018, October 29th, game 8 of the regular season versus the Bulls. Number 9, 2015, October 31st, game 3 of the regular seasons at the Pelicans. Same one as you, Ray. And then number 8, 2016, December 6th, game 21 of the regular season versus the Pacers. Now, Candlestick Will, what about you?
So for number 11, I've got the February 27, 2013 game at Madison Square Garden. For number 10, I've got a tie, January 23rd, 2015, and December 5th, 2016. Those games against the Kings and the Pacers. Klay Thompson had something to do with both of those. April 23rd, 2015, at New Orleans, the West Divisional Playoffs, game 3 of that series. And then for number 8, I have another tie, the June 7th, 2017, and June 6th, 2018 games of the finals against the Cleveland Cavaliers.
Nice.
So, Ray, why don't you break down your 4?
So, the October 31st, 2015 was actually the third game in the regular season, and really it was the kind of what would be, the second coming of Steph Curry's MVP effort when he threw down 53 points. He was 17 for 27, 8 for 14 on threes, 9 assists, 4 steals. I think he had 4 rebounds as well. And to me, that was just, him making a statement, really coming out early in the gate after that game. And it really kind of just put a stamp on the league, just like, hey, I was not a fluke. This is not, I'm not going anywhere, and there's a reason why I am Steph Curry, the greatest shooter of all time. The May 22nd, 2018 game, that was Game 7 of the 2018 semifinals against the Houston Rockets, who we've dominated throughout the course of the 5-year stretch that I chose to focus on. That game was won 101-92. That was a Game 7 again. Just a dominant performance against a team that really went out of their way to try to recruit and build a team to thwart our efforts to the finals, but never seemed to really put it together. They got close in this series. This was the closest they ever got. But even then, it fell short, but it was good enough for a Game 7. It was just a terrific series. Number 9 was the June 11, 2015 game. That was Game 4 in the first championship run for the Golden State Warriors. And the reason why I chose that game was because we were down 2-1, and Andre Iguodala was then placed on LeBron James, and he held LeBron James to 20 points, which for LeBron James is extremely significant. That's usually about less than half of what he puts up on any given night. So for Iggy to really cut him down below that, really it tied the series up, and would be a significant performance in getting the first championship run. And then the May 22nd, 2017 game, that was against San Antonio. That was Game 4. That was a 129-115 victory. Again, this was a statement game against a team that really, I knew that they didn't have a shot in this series when the matchup first came up, because this was just a San Antonio Spurs team that was terrific at, good enough to keep the system going of Popovich and to make the playoffs, but just not the same team. I mean, Parker was a shell of himself. Manu Ginobili was a shell of himself. I think what's his name had already retired.
Duncan.
So yeah, Duncan was already gone. So this was not the same team. But again, this was a dominant performance. This was a team that knocked us out of the playoffs. 1 or 2 the year before we had gone to our first finals. So there was definitely a little bit of I think there was a little bit of heat there. But we certainly. Just another dominant series, Game 4 there, and that was just kind of what stood out to me. Just a lot of there's going to be a lot of closing games I have on my list, but yeah, that's why I chose those 4 games. Just the time period, the signification of that time period, and what it meant going forward for each team, for each version of the Warriors.
What about you, Rudy?
Nice. So I like that Raymond and I have one of the same games, one of the exact same games, just at different levels on this list. The Ray, also that Iggy game, that's a great game. That Iggy game against LeBron, that game is huge, and I really like that it made your list. That's a good one. So that number 11, 2013, April 23rd, 2013, round 1, game 2 at Denver. Warriors, it's their first playoff win with this team, and really it is the beginning of what is going to be one of the most dominated dynasties in NBA history. And it really comes down to this game. They lose that first game. And I don't know if you guys remember, everyone's kind of talking about the Warriors being a little soft. Maybe they don't have what it takes. Maybe they had a good run, but, Denver's got this. And then they come back and they take that series. And it really starts with this first game, round 1, game 2 at Denver. Warriors winning their first playoff game. Steph Curry, 30 points, 13 assists. And that's why I put that one at number 11. Number 10, 2018, October 29, 2018, game 8 of the regular season versus the Bulls. Klay sets the record for most three-pointers in a game with 14. Final score 149-124. So as we kind of mentioned, there's so many great playoff moments, but there were some major significant regular season moments that I thought had to be on here. And Klay's 14 threes, from the moment I sat down to create this list, I was like, that's got to be on there. It's got to be on there. Maybe it doesn't rank as some of my big ones at the very end, but that game's got to be on here. And so I put that one at number 10. Number 9, October 31st, 2015, game 3 of the regular season. Same reasons you did, Raymond. This is the beginning of Steph's his unanimous MVP run, and how can you deny the 53 points? And I mean, you said it perfectly. I have nothing to add, and that's why I ranked it just a little bit higher at number 9. And then number 8, December 16, 2016, game 21 of the regular season versus the Pacers. As we've talked about before, Klay had a little something to do with this one too. Dropped 60 points in 29 minutes. Final score 142-106. Those two dominant performances by Klay. I'll just, guys, give you a spoiler. It's not the last time we're going to see some dominant performances from Klay. The thing I love about Klay is that he's so selfless. But when Klay decides that he is going to win this game, there is nothing anyone can do. and and when he does it at such a level. I mean, it's so funny because Clay will just sit back. He'll let Steph take all the glory. He'll let KD take the glory. But then every now and then the chips are down, and then Clay goes, "All right, everyone move out the way because I'm about to drop a nuclear bomb." And every time he does it in the most grandiose of fashion, and then quietly kind of goes back to the rest of the team. It's amazing. And there's several other games on here where Clay does that, and I love when Clay just decides it's over, I'm taking over, and this is a done deal. And so that's why I have those games. First playoff win, some major regular season performances, and then we'll go from there. But Candlestick will defend your list.
So at number 11, with one of the most winning franchises in NBA history, I started with a loss. So February 27, 2013, at Madison Square Garden, Steph drops 54 points on the Knicks. They lose 109-105, but Steph hits 11 threes, went 11 for 13. So essentially every single time he shot a three, he made it. And just when we're talking about, significance, Steph Curry getting, essentially, MVP level attention from the Madison Square Garden crowd, which is one of the more knowledgeable crowds in basketball history. That's when Jordan dropped 50 in the Garden. When players do that, it's a significant part of NBA lore to have a big game in Madison Square Garden. And Steph went 18 for 28 that night. Just to give you an idea how by himself he was, Klay Thompson had 6 points. Draymond Green had 4 points in that game. Only two other guys had double figures. Carl Landry and Jarrett Jack had 15 and 14. So Steph was literally all by himself. But to drop 54 in the Garden, in what's essentially, because of all his injuries, it was only like his second or third real full season, and just basically announced to the world that he was there. And he was going to be a part of the NBA for a while. So I think that game is way bigger than a lot of the wins they had over this last decade for the impact it had on the league. For number 10, I have the two Klay Thompson games, and also his 37 points in a quarter against the Kings. The Kings game, he had 52 points, ended up with 11 threes. In the Pacer game, he only hit 8 threes, even though he scored 60 points. What I really like about that game, actually, is so Klay Thompson had a plus 38, plus minus. In the Kings game, had a plus 37 in the Pacers game. Steph Curry, though, 10 points, 11 assists, and a plus 20 in the Kings game. 13 points, 11 assists, and a plus 24 in the Pacer game. So basically, Steph Curry just kind of sat back and let Klay shine. And I think that's what separates these Warrior teams from a lot of other great teams, is that when one guy's hot, they just let him stay hot. And they feed him the ball. They make sure he gets the rock. The Kings game, the Pacer game, the Warriors had 45 assists in that game. So, it was just one of the most incredible games they've ever played, 142-106. And Klay didn't even play the fourth quarter. Number 9, April 23rd, 2015 in New Orleans. The Game 3, they're up 2-0 on the Pelicans. They're about to lose Game 3, and Steph hits a 3-point shot in the corner. After missing a shot, Mo Spates gets the rebound, gets it back to Steph. 3 guys fall on him. They don't blow the whistle because referees are terrible. And he hits the 3. The referees literally said after the game that had he missed, they would have called a foul, which makes 0 sense, but whatever. Steph had 40 points that night, 7 threes. Klay had 28 points. Draymond had 17 rebounds. Draymond's defense on Anthony Davis was tremendous, even though Davis had 29 points. He had 29 points and had a negative plus minus. So just to give you an idea, the impact that Draymond had on both sides of the ball. And then for number 8, I have the 2 Kevin Durant dagger games. June 7th, 2017, Warriors up 2-0. They go up 3-0 on LeBron and the Cavs as Durant hits a shot right in LeBron's face. Then 1 day short of exactly 1 year later, on June 6, 2018, Durant does the exact same thing from essentially the exact same spot. 45 seconds left in 2017, he hits a 26-footer when the Warriors were down by 2. It was 113-111, so his three-pointer put him up by 1. Then a year later, with 49 seconds left, he hits a 32-footer from basically the same part of the floor. The Warriors were up 103-100 when he took that shot, and ended up going up 106-100. So those two shots, those two daggers are, I can't decide which one's better, so they're equal in my book. KD had 31, 9, and 4 in 2017 for that game, and KD had 43, 13, and 7 in that 2018 game. Just the most efficient scorer we've ever seen. Had 13 in the first quarter, 11 in the second, 10 in the third, and 9 in the fourth. Just incredible performance.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And if you really hit something, and I think it bears worth repeating, the thing about the Warriors team that's always separated the LeBron teams, even some of the Kobe-era teams, is that the Warriors live and die as a team. It's never been – it's when a LeBron team does great, it's because LeBron. And when a LeBron team does bad, it's because the rest of the guys. And the Warriors, it's always the Warriors. They live and die as a team. And even with KD as a part of the squad, it's always been that way. And there's a selflessness to the Warriors that you just rarely see in NBA. And I think it's probably the thing that makes it's the most commendable, and it is probably their most powerful asset, and why they have been so successful in this era.
Absolutely. So where we got 7 through 4, Ray?
So number 7, I chose Game 5, May 27th, 2015, Golden State versus the Houston Rockets. For number 6, I chose the May 31st, 2018 Game 1 versus Cleveland. And for number 5, I chose June 6, 2018, Golden State versus Cleveland. That was Game 3. And number 4, I chose June 12th, 2017, Golden State versus Cleveland, Game 5 of the finals. These are all the finals here, except for the Houston game was not the finals.
Yeah, Houston hasn't been in the finals in a very long time. What about you, Rudy?
All right, so number 7, April 13th, 2016, the 82nd game of the season. Number 6, May 8th, 2013, conference semifinals, Game 2 versus the Spurs. Number 5, May 28th, 2016, Western Conference Finals, Game 6, Warriors at the Thunder. And then number 4, Western Conference Finals, Game 6, 2018 versus Houston. And what about you, Candlestick Will? What's 7 through 4?
So for number 7, I've got a tie. There's a few more ties coming. So for number 7, I got a tie the June 11th, 2015 and June 16th, 2015 games 4 and 6 against the Cleveland Cavaliers. For number 6, I've got the April 28th, 2013 and May 6th, 2013 from the divisional and semis in 2013. For number 5, I have May 8th, 2013 at San Antonio. So almost the same as you, Rudy. And then number 4 is another tie, May 26th, 2018 and May 28th, 2018 against the Rockets, Western Conference Finals, Games 6 and 7.
Oh, nice. Well, we got pretty close on that one, too. All of us got pretty close on that one.
So break it down for us, Ray.
All right, so number 7, I chose the Game 5 against the Rockets just because, again, this is a closeout game against a team that just, no matter what, they just cannot seem to get past the Warriors. And I take a lot of pleasure in knowing that this team cannot get past the Warriors no matter what they did, no matter how hard they tried. Although, I mean, this was 2015, so this was before they brought Chris Paul over and before they kind of reconstructed the team to quote unquote beat the Warrior Killer team. And but this was back when people were saying, "Oh, this is a great rivalry." And I remember, I believe it was the Beard himself who said, "It's not a rivalry if we keep losing," which is very true. And if you look at the head-to-head matchup against this team, it's really, it's extremely lopsided. So even though it's always a fun matchup to watch, it's double the fun for someone like me because the Warriors mostly win majority of the time. So, and that was just again another statement game to me, in my opinion. A dominant performance in what was a dominant season. Green, Barnes, Bogut, Curry. I mean, this was the original group that played beautiful basketball. Thompson, Curry, and Barnes actually, were all 20 points or above in that game. They all played terrific basketball. And Curry had 5 steals in that game. It was just a really I love seeing closeout games. Harden had only 14 points that game. He was not even, he wasn't there. Dwight Howard had more points than him, and Dwight Howard is.
Hold on, Raymond. Are you saying James Harden didn't show up for a closeout game?
Yeah,
that's weird.
Yeah. 0 for 3 from deep. Yeah, just big shocker there. And then the May 31st, the 2018 Golden State versus Cleveland. That was a 124-114 victory in a game 1 of what would be the most dominant series of the entire Warriors era. And who better to accomplish that than against I can't stand this player, but LeBron James and the Cleveland Cavaliers. So again, I chose this game because the significance, what it meant, who the opponent was. This was, once, Kevin Love, LeBron, Tristan Thompson, all those guys. And this was, I believe, I'm not sure, I think Kyrie Irving was not available. Either he wasn't available or he left. I can't remember. But
the 2018 game?
Yes.
Oh, you mean because they traded him, you mean?
Yeah, was he with the team? Was he injured or was he already left the team?
No, he was gone. Yeah, because
Okay.
he had been traded.
Yeah,
he had already been traded
to
for
the Celtics.
Isaiah Thomas, and then Thomas got moved as well.
Right. And again,
Yeah,
this
was
just,
the infamous J.R. Smith game.
yes.
And LeBron dropping 51 and then scoring 2 points at the very end of the overtime.
Yes, and it was an overtime game. Yes, that's correct. That was the other part of it too. It was an overtime game, and it was an exciting game. But what really stood out to me was the fact that even that was Cleveland's best punch, and their best punch was good enough to get them to overtime and still lose. So to me, that was a big deal because that was the beginning of the end of the series for me. I was like, to me, this is a demoralizing loss because they knew the challenge that was up against that they were up against during this series, particularly because the Warriors had retooled with Kevin Durant, and they knew what this was going to be a tall task because they were not the same team that won a couple years before, and so the whole idea here was that this was a game where the Warriors were rightfully so favored to win this game, and even though it was an exciting game and LeBron James put the entire team on his back, it was a 51 point lost effort, which was great to see. I'm like, yes, you did great, but the 51 points means absolutely nothing when you lose in a finals game, and that's what that game meant to me. It was a big statement game, and it was the beginning of the end. To me, after that game, I was like, there's no way they can win another game because this was their best punch. That took a lot of energy for them just to get to overtime, let alone lose it. And then the May 31st, 2018, or I'm sorry, the June 6th, 2018 game versus Cleveland. So again, this is game 3 of that same series. This is the 110-102 victory. This is the Warriors go up 3-0 in this series. Kevin Durant in particular had a very stellar performance with I believe he dropped 43 points during that game. He was 6 of 9 from 3. He was just so clutch, such an unstoppable force. Everyone else, I think Clay had 10 points, Draymond had 10 points, Curry had 11 points, JaVale McGee had 10 points, although that was pretty good for JaVale McGee. And I think Jordan Bell had 10 in that one, and then Iggy had 8 off the bench, and Sean Livingston dropped 8 off the bench. Two of my favorite bench players on this team was Iggy and Livingston. But
Ray, what? And that was your number 5, right?
No, 6. Yeah, that's number 5.
And then where did that land for you, Candlestick Will?
The Kevin Durant dagger games were tied for 8 with me.
Oh, okay, they were at 8. Okay, got it. I just wanted to see where these all ended up.
This was the game 3, the Kevin Durant game, where everyone else kind of chipped in 8 or 10 points, but Durant said, "No, I'm going to times that by 4 and do this all myself." So that was the big one for me. And then June 12th, 2017, that was again Cleveland Cavaliers against the Warriors, and this was the year before, and this is again just another dominant performance by a very dominant team. This was the Kevin Durant, Steph Curry dynamic duo game where Durant dropped 39, Curry dropped 34, Clay, did about a third of that, and Iguodala dropped 20 off the bench. That was a huge one in that game. But that to me was just this was the season where they were 67-15. They were 36-5 at home that year. They were just so dominant, and this was a home game. And Joe, I just didn't think. To me, it was like again a closeout game where it's like this team they won the game before, but it's like no, this is a 3-1 victory. This is not going to turn into some crazy. Not with Kevin Durant on this team. He's not good. The loss was just like a slip up because the Warriors have this weird thing where, for some reason, they get complacent, and usually in Game 4s, they always let a Game 4 slip away from them. And there's multiple examples that I could point to, but for the sake of time, I'll just say that the Warriors have this little bit of complacency in them where they get a little bit cheeky, and they tend to let a Game 4 closeout slip away, and it pushes it to Game 5. And this was a series where they let a Game 4 slip by them, and then had to go to Game 5. But then in Game 5, just really kind of turned it up. Even though Cleveland won the first quarter, Golden State bounced back to win the next quarter, 38-23, and then Cleveland bounced back and beat them in the third quarter, 33-27. But then Golden State bounced back right again. This was actually a nice back and forth game, but they came back to win 31-27 in the fourth quarter to close out the game and get another ring. And so,
but let's not forget. Sorry, not to cut you off at the end there. Let's not forget the very, very suspect officiating in that first quarter. How many fouls was it? Was it 21 fouls in the first quarter that they called? It was something insane.
Remember, yeah.
Remember that?
Vaguely.
It was an do you remember, Candlestick Will, how many fouls they called in that first quarter? It was insane.
In the 2017 game?
It was in the first quarter, Game 4 in Cleveland, and like the refs just go on to the Warriors. They just couldn't breathe. They wouldn't let them do anything. They couldn't even look at the Cavs wrong without getting called a foul for it. It was something like,
oh yeah, the game you're talking about Game 4 that they lost 137-116.
Mm-hmm. That game, because Raymond was talking about Game 4, how they had problems with that, and he was talking about that.
27 fouls?
There's 27. I know it's somewhere in there. I thought it was 21.
2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Wait, it only says 12. Why does it say 27? Because I'm looking at Basketball Reference right now.
Yeah, I thought it was 21. So if you're saying 27.
Well, but it says, because it's weird, because if you literally just add them up, so like Draymond had 2, Curry had 2, Thompson had 2, which that's more significant, and Iguodala had 2. So 4 of your 5 best players are in foul trouble in the first quarter. But that's 8, and then Durant had 1 is 9, Pachulia had 1 is 10, Livingston had 1 is 11, and McGee had 1 that's 12. But then on the bottom here is his team totals. Oh, I guess that's so they had 27 fouls for the game.
Okay.
All right.
27 fouls.
So but they had 12 fouls in just the first quarter.
Okay, I flipped the numbers. I said 21, it was 12.
Well, but see, so 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. They had 18 fouls by halftime.
It was insane. That was, if there was ever like a clearly the refs have been told to stretch this to another game. It was that game. That game was so obvious what was happening, and I don't you can't even tell me for 1 second that was not designed to be the way that was. That also, Raymond, that was the Cavalier Chris year, the infamous Cavalier Chris, the guy that I met at the bar. That was a kind of someone we talked about for weeks on the GoldCast. Remember that Cavalier Chris?
Yes, I do remember that.
Yeah, that was the Cavalier Chris year. So Candlestick Will, this is pre your time. There was this guy Cavalier Chris who he was coming into my bar. We got along like gangbusters. Super cool guy. He had a big crush on the girl I was working with, and it was just like him and I just got along. And I was like, This I just knew him as Chris at the time. Chris was cool. And then on day 1 of the finals, he comes in to the restaurant rocking a Cavaliers shirt. And I looked at him and I was like, You're a Cavs fan? And he's like, yeah, man, I'm super pumped. I'm so excited. Da, da, da. And he goes, why, who's your team? And I looked at him, I was like, well, I'm from San Francisco. And he looked at me, and like you just saw the color go out of his face. And he just looked at me and was like, oh. And I was like, oh. And it was like that moment like when a Montague realizes he's talking to a Capulet or a jet realizes that this guy's a shark. And I was like, oh, and then it went from so cordial, from like 3 weeks or 4 weeks of us being so cordial to just us arguing about both the teams and us going head to head and being like, you really think you're going to beat us? He's like, I think we're going to sweep you. You're going to sweep the Warriors? What about you? I said, we're going to get you in 5, get you in 5. You guys are so delusional. We went in on each other, just in. And here's the best part. The best part is, remember, the last thing I said to him, I said, well, Chris, you know what the best part about all this debating is? And he goes, what? I goes, one of us is wrong. One of us is going to be wrong. By the end of this series, someone is going to be wrong. And that's what I love, is that one of us right now already is wrong. And we're going to find out. He goes, oh, we are going to find out. I said, we're going to find out. And he left. He didn't even stay for the game. And I never saw him again. He never came back in. Never. I never saw Cavalier Chris again. But we talked about him for that entire run, the entire NBA Finals run, the infamous Cavalier Chris, who I never saw again. To this day, I've never seen him again. That was it. But Raymond, you just reminded me of Cavalier Chris with that story, with all those stories right there. That was good.
Yeah, for sure.
All right, Rudy, what do you got?
Yeah,
I'm sorry,
that was my fourth. No, that was my fourth.
Oh, that was your fourth. Okay. Yeah. So, Rudy, what do you got?
All right, here we go. So at number 7, April 13, 2016, the 82nd game of the season, Warriors versus Memphis. Warriors win their 73rd game, thus beating the Bulls' 72nd win season. Final score 125-104. I will be the first to admit that I was adamantly against the chase of this record, and I do think that it exhausted them to a level that I do think had a significant impact on that playoff run. I think if they treated that season like a regular season, I think we'd probably be talking about the 4-1 Warriors in NBA playoff appearances. But having said that, when the Warriors did it, this is one of the craziest, most exciting moments, and probably the most exciting moment of that season, possibly. I'm trying to see if I got any other games. I do have one game ahead of that, but it was an amazing game and an incredible. It did solidify and legitimized a team that in those first 2 years was criticized and doubted, and there was a lot of doubt. And there was a lot of doubt. And the Warriors came back in that second season after winning the championship and really made a statement. And to go and take the Bulls' 72-win season away from them and win 73, I'm not sure if we'll ever see it again. I'm not sure. But it was a magical run. I was nervous. I was kind of against it. But when we did it, when it finally happened, the elation was pretty amazing. And it was an incredible game and definitely deserved to be on the list. And for me personally, I put it at number 7. But it was a great game. Number 6, May 8th, 2013, the conference semis, Game 2 versus the Spurs. This was the game similar to beating Denver in the first round, which was my number 11. We come all the way down here to number 6. And this game against the Spurs was so pivotal. It's really what it really was about. It was about beating the Spurs. They had not beat the Spurs in the regular season or the postseason since 1997, and to do it for the first time in the conference finals against this is the Spurs. This is peak Spurs. This isn't Spurs coming in later on. This is the team that would go on and when they won their final NBA finals with that core that we already talked about, Kawhi, Duncan, all those guys, Manu Ginobili, Parker. When they did it, it was by the largest margin a team had ever beat another team. And that was the peak Miami Heat team, Dwayne Wade, Chris Bosh, LeBron James. So I know, Raymond, you talked about a dying Spurs. I'm going on the opposite direction. We are talking peak Spurs. We are talking nastiest Spurs that you can think of. Spurs that I love. I love this Spurs team. I love the Spurs era. Every year, they were kind of like the team that I thought if anyone has a chance of taking out the Heat, it's going to be the Spurs. And so
they played beautiful basketball before the Warriors reinvented what beautiful basketball looks like.
Absolutely. And I think this win was so pivotal in the development of this team. And this is really why the 2013 round 1 game against Denver was so important. And then this game here against the Spurs was so important. Both of them game 2s and both of them coming back from losing game 1. So to win these games, it started to build the grit and the fight, and the what happened in very small doses here in 2013 would become the staple of this team, especially when they had to go against those Thunders teams and those Rockets teams that pushed them to the brink, and they really kind of had to pull the season out of their ass and really come together and deny those teams. It really started here, and that's why I put that game at my number 6, just for how important it was. I could see some people thinking maybe you're going to put that over the 82nd win game, the 73rd win game of the season. But there is no 73rd win game without this game. This game was so pivotal in the development of the Warriors, and that's why I put it a little ahead. Now at number 5, May 28, 2016, the Western Conference Finals, Game 6, Warriors at the Thunder. Clay saves the dynasty, part 1. Clay drops 41 points, but he scores 19 points in the fourth to force a Game 7. Warriors go on to close out Game 7, but this is, again, another one of those magical Clay games. 19 points in the fourth alone. That gets me hyped just talking about it. All right, number 4, Western Conference Finals. Game 6, 2018 versus Houston. Clay saves the dynasty, part 2. Final score 115-86. Clay with 35 points. I put these two back to back. Again, Magic Clay. Game 6 Clay is a real thing. We've all seen it before. It is no joke. Game 6 Clay is a real thing, and the stats prove it. And I put these two back to back as just not only being. I remember sitting for both these two series. You can almost put them back, side by side. I remember both these games being on the edge of my seat, and I remember feeling the same way I felt. I believe it was in the 2012 season of the Giants when they were facing elimination. Just thinking, I know we can do this. I just don't know if we can. And these games were so exciting, just nail biters. And Clay coming through in the way he did in both these games. I mean, they're not only some of these games, I think I put them even ahead of those other games, is because they're probably some of my all-time favorite Warriors games and some of the greatest games they played. Just backs against the walls, season on the line. Everything is there. There's, this is it. If they lose, they are done and they are going home, and this dynasty is over. And so for Clay to pull both those ones out, even though we didn't take 2016, I just thought both these games were so exciting and so pivotal. And those are my 7 through 4. So Candlestick, will defend your 7 through 4.
All right, so for number 7, I have the Game 4 and Game 6 of the 2015 Finals against the Cavs.
2 games.
So Game 4 was the first game that Andre started, and then Game 6 was their the end of their first championship.
And that was Raymond. That was your number 9. Was that game where Iggy started?
Yeah, and shut down LeBron.
Mm-hmm. And what I think was interesting about that is that I think when you look back, it's obvious that Steph Curry deserved the MVP for that finals, but Iguodala was incredible, and to prove it, Andre Iguodala in Game 4 had 22 points in 39 minutes, went 4 for 9 from 3. Steph in 41 minutes had 22 points and was 4 for 7 from 3. So their numbers were almost identical. And then in Game 6, Iguodala played 36 minutes, 25 points, 3 of 8 from 3. Steph Curry in over 43 minutes, 25 points, 3 of 11 from 3. So I think when people were looking at the numbers and then the way Iguodala was playing defense on LeBron and making it difficult for him, that combination is why Iguodala ended up getting the Finals MVP. A couple of side notes in that game. Sean Livingston was a plus 25 in Game 4. I think people have always underrated how valuable he was to the dynasty. And then Draymond Green had a triple-double in Game 6, 16 points, 10 rebounds, 10 assists. Was just incredible in that game. For number 6, I have April 28th, 2013 and May 6th, 2013. So I actually this is the second loss I have on my top 11, because in both of these games, Steph Curry dropped 22 points in the third quarter. In the Nuggets game, it put them up 3-1 in the series. In that first playoff series of Steph's career, he had 31 points in the game on 10 of 16 shooting, 6 of 11 from 3. But in that third quarter, he had 22 points on 8 of 11 shooting and 5 of 8 from 3. And then the other game, so now he's in San Antonio. They are ready to face the Spurs in San Antonio, and they lose in double overtime. And Steph Curry dropped 44 points. Was in that third quarter, had 22 points, 9 of 12 shooting, 4 of 6 from 3. The Warriors led for 50 minutes of the 54 minutes of that game, in that double overtime game. Essentially, it's not I rounded around, but with 3:57 to go in regulation, the Warriors were up 104-88. Duncan goes to the locker room because he's hurt. They figured the game was over. Then the Warriors completely stopped scoring. Literally only scored 2 more points the rest of the game, and ends up being 106-106 at the end of regulation. So Duncan is actually jogging back from the locker room to come back into the game at the end of the game. So it was a demoralizing loss, but what Steph Curry did in those 2 series, in those 2 games, in those 2 rounds, was cement his place in the NBA, that he was going to be someone to reckon with. And the combination of that 54-point game that was earlier on my list in the Garden, and then these playoff performances at home against Denver and then at the Spurs, to me are as significant as almost any other game that happened in these 10 years as far as what Steph Curry could do on the floor and what Steph Curry was going to be doing for several years on the floor going forward. So that's why I have those games. It's number 6. Then number 5 is 2 nights later, the game you mentioned, at San Antonio, first road win since 1997. What gets lost in that game, because no one really remembers the stats, they just remember the fact they finally beat San Antonio. Klay Thompson, 34 points, 14 rebounds. He played 46 minutes. So just to give you an idea of how how not deep the Warriors were in 2013. That Klay Thompson played 46 minutes and just had an amazing game. Steph had 22 in that game. But they won in San Antonio. They beat Tim Duncan in San Antonio for the first time in his career. They had never beaten Tim Duncan in San Antonio before. So to do it on the road, obviously, but to do it in the playoffs, among everything else, is pretty impressive. And then
I like that you and I both recognize how important that Denver and that Spurs series back to back. That's really where they got their reps, and that really it was the turning point for the franchise, and it really was the beginning of this team. And I agree with you. It cannot be underestimated how important those two series were for the Warriors back right before the dynasty. That was everything. That shaped everything for them.
And they were a 6th seed, so they weren't supposed to beat an incredibly good Denver team, and they thumped them. And then they lose in double overtime in a game they should have won by 15 in San Antonio, and then that series goes 6. So they could have easily beaten a much better Spurs team. The Warriors didn't have the same. They weren't equal as far as talent. They weren't equal as far as depth, and yet they were absolutely right with the Spurs in that series. So that, to your point, it showed them that no, we can do something here. This is a team we can build around and build upon. So yeah, it absolutely set the stage for what was to come. And then for number 4, I have the Game 6 and Game 7 of the 2018 Western Conference Finals. Rockets being just going full rocket and up 39-22 after the first quarter in Game 6. They were up by 10, 61-51 at halftime. The second half score was 64-25 Warriors. Kevin Durant, Klay Thompson, and Steph Curry combined for 46 of the 64 points. They completely shut Harden and the Rockets down. Harden had 10 points in that second half. The rest of the Rockets had 15 points. Just a complete embarrassment that the Rockets just got completely thumped in the second half when they were dominating to start the game. And then Game 7, even after that debacle, the Rockets were up 54-43 in Game 7, but that was the famous 0 for 27 from 3 game, and the Warriors go to the finals once again because the Rockets do not know how to win playoff series with James Harden. So yeah,
no, and that's also our first tie, Candlestick. Well, you and I tied right there because we both had Game 6 of that Western Conference Finals at number 4. You had Game 7, but we both had Game 6 on that at that same spot.
Yeah. So what about honorable mentions, guys? What do you have for other games worth considering?
I don't have a very robust list, but in fact, you already mentioned it as being on your list, the Klay Thompson 37 points in a single quarter, the third quarter against the Sacramento Kings over there. That was a terrific performance by Klay, the most understated player on the team. You never know when a Klay game is going to come because it's not like they go out and decide. It's not like Klay grabs everyone and says, "Hey, today's my night." It just kind of happens organically. But when it does happen, Klay gets so ridiculously white hot that when the team knows it, they just feed him and he just goes off. The other honorable mention is once again Klay Thompson. That was when he played the Knicks and scored 43 points and only dribbled the ball 4 times. Again, Klay Thompson has this really unique knack for when he goes off. There's just these unique statistics that surround his performance. The 37 in a single quarter, that's crazy. The 43 points on 4 dribbles, that's crazy. He's had a few games where he's scored I think when he scored 60, he dribbled like 11 times in that one. I could be wrong. I could be mixing up stats. But Klay Thompson, outside of Curry, Klay is really my favorite player just because he's so understated and he's very humble and he just wants to win. He's just as selfless as Curry, only he's even more modest than Curry is. And before Curry won the MVPs, Curry was a bit on the modest side too, but then, you could see a little bit more flair come out once he started to gain confidence and be more comfortable within this, kind of front spotlight NBA player role that he has, kind of having similar spotlight to players like Kobe and LeBron. And so, but Clay's just very, very, I don't know, he's just an awesome player. Even though we lost in the last championship run, when Clay was starting to show Game 6 Clay, and he walked back out after hurting his leg and what ended up being a tear, walking back out to make those final 2 free throw shots was just like, the heart of a champion. I couldn't be any more, just wow, just what a performance from Klay Thompson. And so that was just, to me, I just had a couple of Clay games in there. I wanted to keep it short and sweet just because I'm really kind of eager to get to my top 3.
What about you, Rudy?
Same, short and sweet. Number 4, the 2016 playoff run that ended in the Cavaliers infamously coming back from 3-1 and taking the series from us. The number 3, 2019 run, Steph Curry and his kooky quartet losing to the Toronto Raptors. And then number 2, Ray, similar, Clay's 37 points against the Kings. And then number 1, Iggy versus LeBron in the 2015 finals. Those are the 4. I don't know which one of number 3 and 4 pissed me off more. Losing to LeBron when we had him by the balls, or his whole manipulation of Draymond to get him ejected and out of Game 5. I'm not sure what about that. That run just infuriates me. Or the 2019 Toronto Raptors acting like they had the biggest dicks in the world when literally everyone had to be taken out for them to win that series because they weren't actually capable of even touching us. Even with Kawhi, they would have been done in 5 had the whole team been fully healthy. I'm not sure which one of those I find more infuriating, but they haunt me to this day. But I still put them on honorable mentions because I even noted a couple of those games in the top 11 here that they're they still were pretty epic runs by the Warriors, despite not being able to close it out. What about you?
So I have a few. I wanted to shout out some regular season games. So December 3rd, 2013, against the Raptors, Warriors were down 27 in the third quarter. With 9:20 left in the third, they were losing 75-48. They ended up winning 112-103. In the last 21 minutes of the game, they outscored the Raptors 70-28. And the fact that they could be down 27 and come back and win convincingly was just a way of showing the world that Klay Thompson and Steph Curry were going to be a force. So I think that game really stands out. The December 11th, 2015 game, it was the double overtime win against the Celtics in Boston. Klay Thompson was hurt and didn't play. They were 23-0 and had every reason in Boston on the road to just pack it in, let the streak die, and prepare for the next night. And to your point about not going for the record of 73, this could have easily been a game where they rested some guys and just relaxed, and instead they played it like it was a playoff game. And in double overtime, they beat the Celtics. Steph had 38. Draymond had 24, 11, and 8. So just that game to me did a couple things. It showed the NBA that the Warriors were just going to do whatever they can to win every single game, literally. And then it was the seal on what would be the greatest regular season of NBA viewing in my lifetime, even with the Bulls, because the Bulls we didn't get to see very often because back then you didn't get to watch every single game. But every single game, all 82 games were must-see TV, and that 24-0 record is one of the reasons that everyone in the league made an NBA League Pass subscription mandatory. And then similarly, a year earlier, almost exactly a year earlier, on December 14th, 2014, in New Orleans, they were 21-2, or they were 20-2, had a 15-game win streak, and they beat New Orleans in overtime, 128-122, to extend their win streak to 16 games and start that season 21-2. I think a lot of times because of the 73 win season, people completely forget how dominant that 2015 team was, because they were 67-15, but they started the year 21-2, and to do that, finishing off that 16-game win streak with a 128-122 overtime win against the New Orleans Pelicans in New Orleans, it was a pretty significant one. Steph had 34, Clay had 29, so just a signature game for the Splash Brothers. And then my other two were ones that you'd already mentioned, the 73rd win against the Grizzlies and Klay Thompson's 14 threes against the Bulls. 149-124, just shellacking of Chicago. My favorite stat from that game is not actually Klay Thompson's 14 threes, but that Kevin Durant had 14 points, but had a plus 45 on his plus minus for that game. So that's just stupid. And then just a shout out to the 75 playoff wins that I'm not going to mention in my top 11. You know, a couple things I just want to mention about all these playoff runs. So they had 23 playoff series in the 2010s. They went 19-4 in those 23 playoff series. The 4 they lost were taking the Spurs to 6, taking the Clippers to 7, taking the Cavs to 7 in the finals, and taking the Raptors to 6 in the finals. So in those 23 series, they won at least 2 games every single time. They won a playoff game on the road every single time, and they only lost 4, and 2 of them were in the finals. So I mean, this 7-year run is completely bonkers when you look at it from those kind of perspectives. The 2017 season where they went 16-1, that was just insane. We already kind of alluded to the fact that the one loss was because of how many, 4 of the 5 best players getting in foul trouble in the first quarter, and then just, no reason to completely fight when you're down by 30 or whatever it was in that game. The last thing I want to mention, though, before we get to our top 3, is the first 3 seasons of this decade. So the 09-10 season, the 10-11, and 11-12. Those are the first 3 seasons of Steph Curry's career. The Warriors won 26 games, 36 games, and 23 games. So that's a total of 85 wins in the first 3 seasons of Steph Curry's career. The Warriors won 86 playoff games this decade in these last 7 years. So they have more playoff wins than they had regular season wins in 3 years in the start of this decade. So to start this decade with 85 regular season wins in 3 seasons, and to end up as maybe the greatest team we've ever seen, is ludicrous, and just goes to show how much of a skyrocket dynasty this really was.
I love that. That's great. You know what? That opening streak by the Golden State Warriors in 2015 is the most wins by an American professional sports team, and it broke a record that had stood for over 100 years. It was some team in baseball in like the 1880s. I can't remember the name of them, but it is the most wins by a North American sports team. The most wins. They broke like 100-year-old record.
Yeah, I mean it's pretty obscene when you really look at all the records that they've broken in the last 7 years. It's pretty incredible. So Ray, what do you got? Top 3. Let's hear it.
All right, I've got the June 8th, 2018 Game 4 Golden State versus Cleveland. For number 2, I've got the May 28th, 2016 Game 6 Golden State versus Oklahoma City. And for number 1, I've got the June 16th, 2015 Golden State versus Cleveland Game 6.
Nice. What about you, Rudy?
Oof, man. 2 of these have already been said. Number 3, June 12th, 2017, NBA Finals, Game 5 versus the Cavs. Kevin Durant drops 39 points to close that sucker out. Number 2 is the one that's already showed up on all your lists. Raymond, you picked Game 4. I picked Game 3, the KD Dagger 3 game. June 18th, June 6th, NBA Finals Game 3, Warriors at the Cavs. The KD Dagger 3, the drop back, step back 3, right in LeBron's face. I think that's got to hurt more than even Game 4 for him. It was just a It was
That was a great moment.
It was, and that moment just solidified at that point that KD was the king, and that to me, it was a real tough one. It was between that and Game 4. It was real tough for me, but I was like, you know what? Just for sheer moxie and just like, just pump the chest. You are done. This is over. I had to go with Game 3, and then number 1. I also have chosen June 16th, 2015, NBA Finals, Game 6, Warriors at the Cavs.
Well done.
Warriors defeat the Cavs to win their first championship, 100%. I went with that, number 1, baby. That was it. That's it. We got another tie. All right, Candlestick Will, what you got?
Well, I did ruin it then because I have mentioned that game already. So we won't have a sweep for our number 1. But I think the game I have number 1 is a game no one's mentioned yet. So that's going to be interesting. So for number 3, I've got the May 28th, 2016 Western Conference Finals Game 6 against the Thunder. For number 2, I've got the February 27th, 2016 overtime win at the Thunder, the Steph game winner. And then for number 1, I've got May 10th, 2019 against the Rockets, Western Conference Finals Game 7, where and I'll get to why in just a minute. So Ray, break down your top 3.
All right, so I chose the June 8th, 2018 game, the Game 4, because this was, again, a closeout game in a 4-game sweep in another dominant performance, where the Warriors said, not today. Sorry, Mr. LeBron James. Not happening today. LeBron James had a very mediocre game in this game. This was a Steph Curry game by and large. Kevin Durant did chip in 20. Klay Thompson with an understated 10. JaVale McGee 6. Draymond Green chipped in 9. But Steph Curry came out and said, we are closing you out, and dropped 37 big ones during this night. He shot nearly 45% from three-point. He was 7 of 15 for that night. He was 100% on free throw attempts with 6 for 6. He had 3 steals, 3 blocks, 4 assists. He was just magnificent in this game, and I'm surprised he doesn't have at least one Finals MVP throughout the 5 trips that they made, because he certainly made a case, and I think, in my opinion, at least 2 of those trips he made a significant case, and then one of them could possibly have been a toss-up. But to me, this was just another game where it's just like in your face, in your goddamn face, in your face of the king, who I think he only shot 1 3-point attempt in that game, and he missed that one. He made only 9 of 11 free throw attempts, and only dropped 23 points in a very mediocre effort. Kevin Love was lackluster that game. J.R. Smith dropped 10 in that game. Everyone else was single digits with the exception of Rodney Hood, who played decent off the bench. But there was just, I believe the team was just really dead at this point, because, again, this was a series that they never really had a chance in. I mentioned Game 1 earlier in my list for this series, because this was just, they were just outmatched and outgunned in every single way. Steph Curry dropped 12 in the first quarter alone. Then Steph Curry dropped 8 in the second quarter. And then Klay Thompson dropped his 10. He made all of his money in the third quarter. Klay finally came alive after really being very quiet most of the game, but he dropped 10 in the third quarter, and that was nice to see. And then, again, Curry was very consistent. He dropped 12 again in the fourth. When it counted the most, he showed up, and he was very, very consistent. By the way, comparatively, LeBron James put in 3 points in the fourth quarter. He did not show up. The May 28th game that I have at number 2, once again, I just can't impress upon you how impressive the Klay Thompson performances are whenever they do decide to show up. This was a do-or-die moment. A do-or-die moment when, by the way, Steph Curry dropped 0 points in the first quarter in a do-or-die game. It was not looking good for them early on. And, Klay Thompson he dropped 7, so he was pretty good in that quarter. And the teams were pretty evenly matched in that first quarter. But then the second quarter, Again, Curry came alive with 9. Klay Thompson was consistent with 9, but Kevin Durant dropped 12. And then really in the third quarter, that's when Steph Curry finally came alive and dropped 14 big ones in that quarter. And third quarter has just been a very consistent and strong quarter for the Warriors throughout this entire dynasty. It's just been a money quarter for them for whatever reason. I think there's something about the way that Steve Kerr regroups them and has them come out for that, because they've always played excellent coming out of the halftime break. And sure enough, that was the case in this game. But then, of course, the money quarter, when it counts the most, not how you start, it's how you finish. And Klay Thompson finished with, as you mentioned, Rudy, the big 19 points in the fourth quarter. Everyone kind of chipped in the fourth quarter. Everyone was plus in the plus category, even on the bench for this team, while everyone in Oklahoma City, every single player in Oklahoma City in the fourth quarter was a minus. Whether they were on Dion Waiters, Randy Foye, Anthony Moreau off the bench, and then Durant, Westbrook, Serge Ibaka, Andre Robertson, and Steven Adams, all minus in the fourth quarter. They did not show up. Meanwhile, the Warriors closed the game out, and Klay Thompson salvaged the series in what would be a very historic performance. And then number one, of course, I think for the obvious reasons, this was the beginning of the dynasty, and the signification of that just really kind of stood out to me. It was the easiest game for me to pick just because of what it meant for this whole journey, that losing the 2 playoff appearances the years before under Mark Jackson, and having a new head coach that really kind of took a good team and made them great with his philosophy of basketball, coming from a championship pedigree when he was a player, and bringing that into the fold in Golden State. It just means a lot. It meant a lot. It meant what would be the first of 5 trips to the NBA Finals, 3 of which would result in being NBA champions. And that was a big deal, because everyone really chipped in this closeout game. Curry had 25 points. Green had 16. Iggy had 25. I mean, this was just a big, big game. The 3-point performance was not as great as it usually is. I think Curry didn't have a great performance shooting wise, but for the 3. But he made 3 out of his 11 attempts. But again, this was a big closeout game in what would be the first of a big run. LeBron James actually had a big game in that final closeout game, but it obviously wasn't enough. And Steph Curry had a big fourth quarter. He scored 13 in the fourth. LeBron's had 10, but it was enough. It was enough to really close it out. I think JR15 even had 15 in the fourth quarter. They really tried to, make it a game there, but it just wasn't enough. And sure enough, that would be the first of 5 trips to the finals, and that was why I chose it as number 1, just because it was the beginning of the dynasty.
What about you, Rudy?
All right, so there's not a whole lot I can say about numbers 3 and 2, but I'll remind the audience just so they can hear them that I don't think there's a lot I can say that hasn't been said. June 12th, 2017, NBA Finals Game 5 versus the Cavs to win the finals. We close it out. We avenged the 2016 season. Same with Raymond. I love closeout games. I love the significance of these games. 2018, the June 6th, the KD Dagger game. I mean, I kind of already embellished on it even when I dropped it. I mean, it was just the most moxie game, and to do it against LeBron and to do it against that team was such an epic game. And then number 1, I'm going to come at it from a different perspective. I love everything that you said, Ray, and I completely agree with you. This also was now the second team to bring a championship to the Bay Area. And while the San Francisco Giants are pretty much the sole property of San Francisco, the Warriors are the one team that the entire Bay Area can rally around. And that's something that's really special. And that it was actually a team that could unite the entire Bay. And that we could all celebrate together and be united as one. And it isn't about the Raiders, or it isn't about the Niners or the A's and the Giants. This is the one team that we all rally around. And so it was just really special not only for that the Warriors did it for themselves and were able to come to break this 40-year curse and bring another championship to the team and to the franchise, but also just unite the Bay. And then on a second level, bring another championship to San Francisco, a third team about to embark on a dynasty. And having lived through the 49ers, the Giants, and then to see the Warriors, this was quite the epic run. And this was the start of something that was really special. I had no idea that it was going to go beyond this. I remember the time just being like, I can't believe we have 4 championships and 5 appearances. I can't believe we're even at this level in the Bay. This is incredible. And then to not realize it wasn't even remotely done. In fact, we just got done appearing in another NBA Finals and Super Bowl here in 2019 and 2020. We're not even done. We're not done winning championships. I don't believe that we are. I would not be surprised if the Warriors brought another championship in the next couple of years. And I also believe the 49ers are going to do the same thing. And so it was really the significance of showing that the San Francisco Bay Area, we weren't done. And in fact, we were just getting started on our domination. And we are basically about to become the new Boston. And I remember when a buddy of mine, he called me midway through this Niners season, and he goes, I want to let you know, you guys are the new Boston. And I was like, what do you mean? He goes, I think you're going to the Super Bowl. And it drives me nuts. He goes, because you guys just go to a championship every year in something now. And you've done this for the whole decade. It's insane. And I'm like, I started laughing and I go, I guess you're right. We do go to a lot of championships. And that's one thing I really like to brag about on the GoldCast, because you just don't hear it enough. And, we've got to hear all day about New Yorkers when that team hasn't been, when almost none of their teams have been significant for this entire century. Boston has rubbed it in everyone's faces over and over and over again on every single between Fox Sports, ESPN, Bleacher Report, The Ringer, Grantland. You've got to see it over and over and over again. And no one fights for the Bay. And we are literally been the most dominant sports area of the decade, and no one fights for us. And it really started with this game, and it really started with winning this championship. And so I think that's something that we can't ignore, is also just the significance for this fan base and for the San Francisco Bay Area, just how important this was. And it gives me chills when I talk about it. It's something that we will probably never see again, but what a run, man. What an incredible run. And it all started right here on June 16, 2015, when the Warriors defeated the Cavs in Game 6 of the NBA Finals. And all it did was extend what I thought ended with the San Francisco Giants. It was really just beginning, and pretty special, and gives me chills to think about it to this day. And for me, it had to be at number one for all the reasons, for the significance of it, the importance of it, the historical importance, and just the sheer excitement of seeing the Warriors pull off something that nobody thought they were going to be able to do at the beginning of the season. Everyone doubted them through the entire season, and no one thought they were going to beat LeBron and the Cavaliers in the beginning of that season. I mean, at the beginning of that finals, they were completely counted out. And so it was just a magical run, and definitely that's why it's at my number one. So Candlestick Will, what about you, buddy?
So for number 3, I have the May 28, 2016 game at the Thunder, Western Conference Finals, Game 6. Everyone knows it as the Klay Thompson game. Klay had 41, 11 three-pointers, 19 points in the fourth quarter, went 5 of 6 from 3. People will forget very quickly that Steph Curry had 31 and was 6 of 14 from 3. Or that Draymond had 12, 12, and 6 and was a plus 16, because Klay Thompson was just incredible. I mean, 11 threes in a playoff game, do or die on the road, down 3-2, must-win game. Warriors outscored the Thunder 33-18 in the fourth quarter. It was one of the most ridiculous performances we've ever seen, and we've talked at length about all the ridiculous Klay Thompson performances we've seen. This one was by far his best, and definitely worthy of a top 3 slot. Number 2, earlier that season, maybe the greatest regular season game in NBA history, certainly in the conversation. February 27, 2016, at the Thunder, Steph Curry with 46 points, hits the game winner in overtime. The biggest moment of that game was Andre Iguodala hitting 2 free throws, down 2 with 0.7 seconds left. Iguodala was a 61% free throw shooter. that season. Both teams had shot under 60% for the game going into that moment. So nobody was making free throws all day. Iguodala hardly ever makes his free throws, and he hits 2 free throws down 2 with 0.7 seconds left. The fact that they even had the opportunity to take that shot is crazy in itself. Clay hit a couple of clutch shots, with less than a minute to go, but Clay gets the layup with like 7 seconds left, or like 12 seconds left, something like that. And then they go to inbound the ball. Durant gets it. They don't foul him. They double team him in the corner. Instead of calling a timeout, he tries to throw a pass to half court. It gets stolen by Klay Thompson. Draymond gets the loose ball, gets it back to Klay Thompson, who throws it to Iguodala. Iguodala gets fouled by Durant on the shot, trying to shoot a shot with a second left, and ends up going to the line. The game itself, I mean, the Thunder were up double digits in the second half. They were up with like 4 minutes to go, where it looked like the game was over, and the Warriors just never stopped coming back. And they were 51-5 coming into that game. They leave that game 52-5. Steph Curry cemented his place as the MVP that night. The MVP was decided, if it hadn't already been, in February, which is just ridiculous. In some ways similar to the way Giannis has played this year for the Bucks, where the MVP is pretty much already locked up. But the one game that I think has been better this decade than that was the Western Conference Finals, Game 7, May 10th of last year, to get the Warriors to a 5th straight finals. No Kevin Durant. Kevin Durant's hurt. Steph Curry, 0 points in the first half. Klay Thompson goes for 21 in the first quarter. Steph Curry goes for 33 in the second quarter, or 33 in the second half. And I said that wrong. Klay Thompson had 21 points in the first half. Steph Curry had 33 points in the second half. Just an unbelievable game with no Kevin Durant. Steph Curry and Klay Thompson beat James Harden in Houston again for the 4th time in 5 years. We talked about it last week, where it looked like, the every time that the Niners played the Packers, the Niners won. Every time the Warriors played the Rockets, the Warriors won when it mattered. And my favorite thing about this game, besides the fact that this was like the old school Warriors, with just Steph, Klay, and Draymond, Iguodala and Sean Livingston, and not much else, is how many minutes the other guys played. Andrew Bogut, who had come back from Australia, was not the Andrew Bogut of the 2015 team. Played 11 minutes in that game. Jonas Jerebko played 12 minutes. Alfonso McKinney played 6 minutes. Quinn Cook played 15 minutes, and Jordan Bell played 10 minutes. This was the epitome of strength in numbers. The epitome of Steph Curry as a legend. The epitome of Klay Thompson is vastly underrated as a two-way player. Maybe the most underrated player in the NBA right now. Those two in the Splash Brother, era, the Splash Brother dynasty, the whole aura of that group, to me, this game solidifies all of that. That all the talk about the Warriors ruined the NBA, Kevin Durant was soft for coming to the Warriors after losing to him, all that nonsense of people just being jealous and bitter that their favorite team didn't do it, didn't go out and sign the best free agent available, that the Warriors without KD it didn't matter. They still beat the Rockets because the Rockets are a team full of losers who lose all the time. And I know that's harsh, and I know that's not actually true, but I like to be petty when it comes to the Rockets because their fans are delusional, and they continually act like James Harden is amazing when every time it matters, James Harden shrinks and chokes, and I would hate for my favorite player to be that way. And so I like the fact that my favorite team has players that win. It's kind of cool that way. And so that's my little petty rant on why it's the number one game for me in this last decade, because it just signified every single thing that this team was. It was that they found a way to win anyway. They found a way to win when people thought they were finally going to go away. And for an entire year, and really 3 years, but an entire year, everyone was talking all of last season about, will the Warriors finally die? Will the Warriors finally end? When Draymond Green and Kevin Durant had the infamous fight in front of everyone in LA when they played the Clippers and lost, every single talking head was like, this is it. Finally, the Warriors are finally going to crash. They're finally going to burn. And even though they did end up losing to the Raptors in the finals, they got all the way to the finals because the league wanted them to finally fall apart, they chose to keep fighting. And even in that finals, they get to Game 6. They almost won Game 6. And had they won Game 6, they would have had a Game 7 at home, and who knows what would have happened. So even with the injuries to Clay and Durant, they still may have had a shot at possibly winning that series had it gone to 7, because who knows with the Game 7. And so just all the things they've been through in these last 7 years, especially, that game to me sums it all up.
I love that. That is I 100% agree. What I also find interesting, and I think it's worthy of note, that Game 6, the Klay Thompson 41-point game, that is in the top 5 of all 3 of ours. That made Raymond's number 2. It made your number 3. It made my number 5. And I think there's something to be said about that in particular. Overall, a really great set of lists. I will say one thing about I'll say one compliment about the Rockets, and then I'll say one not very nice thing about the Rockets. The one thing I'll give them credit for, at least their GM, I'll give their GM credit that while every other team tried to run away, they were the one team that were like, screw it, we're going to go right for these guys. And they never shied away from us.
1,000%. They absolutely get credit for that.
Yeah, I'll give them credit for that every day. Like, no question, they were the one team. They were never afraid, and they stepped up to the plate when everyone else was trying to run away as far away from possible as the Warriors as they could. But
they knew who they had to beat if they wanted to get a ring.
Yeah,
it was only one team.
Yeah, right. It's easy. In fact, we made it easy for them. Beat one team. Now, my one not very nice thing about them is that when your number one player, when part of his offensive strategy is to purposely land 2.5 feet in front of where he jumped to make his shot in order to draw a foul that isn't really a foul, and then gets mad at the refs for not calling that foul, that's bitch shit. So I'm sorry. Like when part of your game is to manipulate the refs to create fouls that don't exist, I don't have a lot of respect for you. So you get what you deserve.
Well, the other issue is when part of your game is to play iso ball against a team that knows that you're going to play iso ball. It's the results speak for themselves.
Yeah.
Harden's terrific, and he reminds me of Peyton Manning. Terrific in the regular season, but when the lights shone on him throughout the postseason, it was just a lesser version of himself.
Yeah. Yeah, I also just think that style is not sustainable.
At least Peyton got rings, though.
Yeah, Peyton Manning got a couple of rings, so Harden's not quite there yet.
No.
He's more like the Charles Barkley.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Any final thoughts, Ray, before we wrap up?
Just that these were great lists, and I think I really like to hear all of the admiration towards Klay Thompson, because I feel like he really deserves it, and he goes unnoticed a lot. Obviously, not in the Warriors locker room, but in the greater NBA. I mean, he has the textbook shot that is taught in the lower divisions, because his style of play, his shooting mechanics are the quintessential form that is taught in the lower division. I mean, that's how great Klay is of a basketball player, where he is the quintessential grade A example of how you are supposed to shoot the basketball in if you want to, really hone your skills and refine your skills. That's he's like the training poster boy for how you shoot the basketball, not only in the NBA, but also in the NCAA.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. It's funny because across the board, I think if you never knew who the Warriors were at the end of these lists, you'd be sitting here going, who is this Klay Thompson guy? He sounds like the greatest basketball player of all time.
Yeah, are you sure? It's like, I thought Curry was the MVP.
Yeah. How come this Klay guy never won the MVP? This is the guy you guys all keep talking about. But I think it also goes to show that when it comes to the fan base, when it comes to the real Warriors fans, it's Klay's undeniable. He's undeniable, and man, he has just. If you're putting together top 11 games of all time, Klay's going to throw a lot of haymakers because he's put up just some epic runs. Candlestick, what about you? Any final thoughts, bud?
Well, yeah, I think one of the things that we established with our list is that Klay Thompson is as much a part of this legacy as Steph is. With how many signature Klay games were on our list. I do think that if we were to ask 100 Warrior fans what's the best game of this decade for the Warriors, that it's going to be one of those two Thunder games for most people. They might pick a game like the Rockets game that I picked, or like one of the Cavs games that you guys picked, because of the significance of the championships, obviously, or because of how fun it is to beat the Rockets and how many different ways they beat the Rockets. But those two Thunder games in particular, the Game 6 Klay game and the regular season game, I think are the ones that stand out the most as far as just how epic they were for so many different reasons. So I think those Thunder games are going to end up being the ones that people talk about 10, 20 years from now. The way that they'll talk about the Michael Jordan flu game when they talk about the Bulls, 20, 30 years from now. That flu game will be, one of the main ones, or the clinching game against the Jazz where he hits the shot over Russell. Those games are going to get more attention than a lot of the other games that they won, or the John Paxson shot or the Steve Kerr shot. Like, those games are going to stand out more than all their other wins, because those are the ones that have the best narrative. And so for the Warriors, I think those two Thunder games are going to end up having the longest lasting effect on what people talk about first when they mention the dynasty.
You might be right. Definitely the most epic run, one of the most epic runs I've ever seen in my life. And what say you, GoldCast Nation? Let us know. Go to youtube.com/theGoldCast and let us know what your top 11 Golden State Warriors games of all time are. Or go to Twitter at Top 11 Podcast, TOP11 Podcast. Go to at Top 11 Podcast and let us know what your top 11 Golden State Warriors games of all time will be. We will be back later on next week with the top 11 greatest San Francisco Giants games. And as we've been pumping through every episode of the last couple weeks, then we go into the finals. We may not have NCAA March Madness, but we have a Bay Area March Madness right here, and it is to determine what the greatest games of the last 10 years are. And so stay tuned. Lots of great content coming back up. And so concludes another edition of the Top 11 Podcast. We are the voice of the Bay. I'm your host, Rudy Solis III, and with me is my brother, my co-host,
Raymond Solis I, baby.
And our esteemed co-hosts,
Candlestick Will.
Boom! We'll see you next time. Same GoldCast time, same GoldCast channel.
This is the GoldCast.